Hi, I wanted to react to a article that I came across that is close to me. It's in BC, which is where I'm located, and is kind of an issue not just in what it says here, Kelowna, but just across Canada in general for the most part. Saying high unemployment in Kelowna, making it hard for young people to find work. If no one knows, our unemployment rate is at like 14.6 or like 15%. It changes obviously a bit, but it's the highest it's been since I think our last recession. Of course, they blame most of it on COVID, which is a contributing factor, but then uh, it's surprising because it's maintained itself even after COVID. And there's various reasons for that. I don't think they really go into details about it here. This is more this is by Cohen Sassaman from Global News. It just makes more blanket statements without going into the details, probably for being politically correct. But anyways, yeah, I it basically talks about how younger students are finding a hard time finding entry level jobs, and that it's keeps increasing and is in the highest in Kelowna. I think it went from like 6% to 9 point something percent, which is like 2.5 points higher than the national average. And kind of goes into some reasons that they believe it's oversaturated workforce, lack of experience, more experienced candidates taking these entry level jobs, which again, they kind of skip out on the details of what they mean by that. It's just they just use a blanket term like that, like, oh, experienced workers. I'm like, experienced in retail or experienced in what do you mean? Are they more older? Are they used to work in entry level retail, left, and then came back to that job? Or like, how do you gain the experience, leave that job maybe for a better job or a different field, and then come back to it? And why would you? But anyways, um, so taking a summer job is longer than expected, etc. Resume. Matin, more than a person named Matin, more than 20 stores before I got an interview. That seems pretty normal. Um, that's been the experience for most people, even with people that have degrees. Getting that experience, you need the experience in order to get the job, but then you can't get the experience because they want it's that paradox of you just can't get the job because I don't have the experience, but they want the experience. So where do I get it from? Statistics Canada labor force, as I mentioned, 6.3 to 9.2% in June. It jumped uh, that percent, 2.5% points higher than the national average. Um, the region added 2,300 jobs, but nearly 2,900 entered the workforce, the labor force, so it pushed the unemployment rate higher. The recruitment specialist of Con Recruitment says young workers are often competing with experienced candidates who are now applying for entry level jobs. And again, I don't know what that means. Experienced, as in they used to work in that field and came back. They're older, or they just have experience working in general. Um, my interpretation of what I think is actually contributing to the youth unemployment overall is immigration, mass immigration. Now, I think the Canadian government agrees to that, I think they quietly know that, and that's why they've been reversing all the policies around immigration, capping the numbers of recruitment at universities, where universities can only take, say, 30% of international students as their whole student body. Um, Canceling programs for, say, international parents to come on visas, um, trying to saying that temporary foreign workers and temporary visas are now being expired, that you're expected to leave. So I think they know they expected to bring in a bunch of immigrants to fill the skilled labor that they needed, whether it be in healthcare or trades or whatever it may be. They were trying to fill those gaps, didn't realize a human factor that is maybe they do come to work in those positions, but it's also up to the company if they want to decide to hire them or not. So um, they went and got their degrees. They tried to enter the country to get their PR. And then when they got the degree, they tried to enter these jobs, but they also want experience from them as well. But they don't have the experience, just like with Canadian born. But also on top of that, before you enter the country, you have to take an IELTS exam, your English proficiency, and it wasn't a very strict or well thought out system. So if you wanted to take your IELTS to prove your English proficiency, say if you were in India, it wasn't given from the it wasn't a test taken from the Canadian side. It wasn't like, oh, the government of Canada gave you the test, you entered a special code, you had to take it online, it was proctored, etc. A lot of them, especially in northern India, would take it at these certain uh, institutions, and a lot of it was either just bribed, cheated, falsified. A lot of that goes on over there, and then they say, "Oh yeah, you passed. You go ahead with your visa application. You get the visa, and then you end up in Canada." And especially at the peak of that, I remember working with many people that spoke broken English that could only speak one or two words. They would point to things at their phone. Um, they couldn't put a sentence together pretty much. And my wife, being from India, immigrated from India about 8 years ago now, we would talk about that, about the fraud there, and her parents would talk about the fraud and how they get in and what we experience working with them, and that they can barely speak the language. And so when they go to get a job, or even as they're doing their degree, um, they end up cheating. They end up, yeah, basically just cheating and trying to get their degree, which is very common. Again, they admit to it if you just have casual conversations with many of them. They're like, not even a month ago, I've talked to someone that was like, yeah, I took my exam online, not the IELTS, like a university exam, and it's proctored online. They get you to show your phone, etc. And they would just hide their phone behind the computer and scroll and cheat the exam pretty much. But it doesn't ultimately end up helping them. What happens is they cheat, they speak poorly, they try and get a better job. Doesn't happen. They stick into the entry level jobs, just trying to get their PR because that's ultimately the goal for them, their permanent residency. And that's when you have an oversaturated entry level job market, because the government's expectations is to fill the higher roles, but it doesn't happen because the system they set up was poorly managed, low standards. And I think they even quietly admitted to that because they sent out to a bunch of immigrants to take their English proficiency test again in Canada, though. So I think there's all these little systems that you don't really hear about on the broader news from global news or anything. You just hear from talking to people where they're like, yeah, oh, I got to take my test again and my English proficiency. I'm like, oh, really? I never heard about that. And I only hear about it through my wife and her cousins and people they know. I'm like, oh, well, that's good. But it obviously points to a problem that they are admitting, but quietly admitting. So yeah, then you end up with an oversaturated entry level job market where experienced candidates, which again, that's why I don't like when they use these, like, what does that mean? Go into more detail. Are really just immigrants that have experience abroad or are older, so they have experience just working in general. It's not their first job, and get these jobs, and they're willing to work anything. Like, they'll take anything for any pay, um, any sort of hours, and they'll fill the hours that are needed for PR with maybe a second job or a third job. And yeah. Anyways, there are senior people coming into junior positions. Again, I always say this, there's like, mostly immigrants, they're in their 30s, mid 20s, working at entry level jobs, taking these jobs from Canadian born um, youth and elderly who are trying to make supplemental income where disability isn't enough for them to live. So it used to be like that when I was growing up, is you would have the elderly basically working the tills, making supplementary income, working part-time, students working behind them. My brother worked at Tim Hortons doing the same thing, putting the food together, etc., getting your drinks, and it was nice. Students were getting the experience they needed, working the job, and the elderly were getting the supplementary income that they needed when um, their pension wasn't enough. She says it makes it especially difficult for students and recent graduates trying to gain their first work experience. Difficult for students and recent graduates. Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, we hire students at ours. I used to handle the hiring um, for where I worked, and we get like 400 to 600 applicants in 1 month. And honestly, just by reading the names, most of them would be uh, international students or, yeah, foreigners. Um, we mostly looked for, because our job requires a lot of communication, we looked for personality, if they're easy to work with and just, seem overall nice. But we would get a more feel for that during their probation period of 3 months. And also their, what did I say? Communication. Oh, personality and communication. If they're capable of communicating efficiently without broken English or a heavy accent or things like that. And people are like, well, that's kind of discriminatory. It's like, well, if the job requires communication, most jobs, even government jobs, say proficient in English or French, et cetera, because you have to be able to communicate with people and clients in order to give that quality of service, or in order just to help them. So it's kind of the absolute bare necessity that's required of you. It's like traveling to Japan and saying, I don't speak Japanese, but I'm going to work with um, people on a day-to-day basis and just try and speak English. It doesn't work. Um, so not every industry is struggling to hire. However, IT, support, specialized, etc. See demand while opportunities in construction and hospitality have slowed. Yep, makes sense. Her advice to job seekers is to tailor every resume to the position, keep their LinkedIn profile up to date, and stay open to opportunities that help build experience. For young people trying to get their foot in the door, the biggest challenge isn't finding a job, it's standing out and increasingly. So this is, I feel like these specialists and these people that are like, oh yeah, I work in analysis of why this and that. Like the biggest thing that they miss is they only work with numbers from abroad and also from polls or data that they collect. They're never like on the ground working beside these people day to day. Um, and I work an entry level job. My brother works an entry level job. Many I've known have worked an entry level job even into their mid 20s, etc. And the problem is just it's oversaturated, mostly due to immigration, large amount of population growth in a short period of time, and anyone's willing to work anything. And it doesn't matter if you tailor your resume to the position. I mean, yes, it helps when you're seeking for like, um, you might stand out a little bit, but really also, what is it? 80% of jobs are filled by networking, like who you know kind of situation. And they call it networking, but I say it's mostly nepotism. Like networking isn't like, oh, my friend's now the manager at Tim Hortons and he hires me because I know him. Um, and we're friends, or my dad works here and he hired me, or my dad's friend works here and he hired me. That's a network for sure, but I'd say that's more nepotism. Networking is like, I reached out to the recruiters there personally by email, and I volunteered and met somebody in that company I wanted to work for because I volunteered for them. That's more networking. Having something that you didn't really control that already existed, a connection, is more nepotism than networking. So 80% of jobs are filled by networking, and that's why I personally find from most jobs, most entry level jobs that I'm seeing, um, that you'll see, and my wife points this out too, being Indian herself, is that Indians will hire other Indians, Asians will hire other Asians. Like you're more attracted, we more segregate into our own groups. It's almost like human nature because you have more in common, and and you know each other and friends of friends, etc. So they end up hiring those people, and it goes the other way in every direction. So um, I think that's what's happening. There's a lot of youth that try and get their foot in the door. Um, there's these middle-aged people, especially a lot of mature students, immigrants, etc., taking these jobs and out of desperation will accept any sort of condition of the job, lower pay, you'll work whatever hours, even if it's affecting your mental health and is the toughest on you. And everyone else is just basically, it's just a war of attrition. You just keep throwing resumes out and hope something sticks. And for our workplace, we have hired, like, we have quite a few Canadian borns that work there and a couple immigrants as well that do a good job, um, have assimilated well and work. There's cultural cohesiveness and they're able to communicate and work well with each other. Um, but talking to those younger people between the age of 16 to 20, asking them like, do your friends work? And most of the time the answer is no, or like very little, like one shift a week, two shifts a week, very small amount of hours. Some people that want to work that, yeah, just can't. So there's elderly, and I think a generational gap that doesn't understand because they moved on. They work in the professional field now. They don't work in the entry level. They don't have that direct experience working side by side and what the problems are, but the youth does, the new generation, or like Gen Z, Gen Alpha mostly. And they can tell you, like, yeah, we've tried, we can't, my friends are trying, here's the problems, here's why we can't. It's not like they don't want to work. They throw out resumes continuously, and when they do land a job, I'd say 90% of the time they're willing to learn, work quite hard, and want to work there, want to earn the hours. And one of our workers is, a high school student, and then they do their high school, and then they'll come to work at 4:30, 5 o'clock, work until 10 o'clock at night, and do that 5 days a week. So they're working full time while going to high school because they wanted to keep that job as well, even after the fact. So, whereas when I went to school, getting a job was at Tim Hortons, McDonald's, a restaurant, all these entry level places was just kind of a given. You just apply, and you knew you were going to get one of those jobs. You kind of almost had a choice, like, oh, I don't want to work at Tim Hortons, I want to work at McDonald's, or I don't want to work there, I want to work at Canadian Tire. I don't want to work there, I want to work somewhere else. You had these choices, and you knew something was going to stick. And now it's so oversaturated. It's a problem, as I already mentioned, created by mass population growth through immigration that has oversaturated it for them and undervalued their work. Because when you do that, where people are working out of desperation for these companies that say, oh, they can't find anyone to work, so we're just hiring immigrants and getting subsidized labor, which is a thing. I think it's called LMIA. We used to have one where if a company can prove that, hey, we're not getting any job applications, which again, it's another flawed system. Hey, we can't find anyone to work this job, et cetera, et cetera. So we're applying for this person on their behalf to help get their PR, and then we get, you know, subsidized salary for them or hourly rate for them, etc. Um, Companies are abusing that and making use of that. Uh, and yeah, it's just there's so many problems systematically, from the immigration system, the English proficiency, the universities through their price gouging 3 times tuition on students, promising them things that aren't really to be promised, to the temporary foreign worker program, to these LMIA programs. Like, it's just one big mixed up mess that has caused this youth unemployment, I believe, for so many. And it's only going to get harder and harder, and has taken up housing at the same time. So more people, rent is becoming unobtainable, especially if you can't find a job. So if you can't find a job or even a part-time job, you can't afford the rent. If you can't afford the rent, you're not going to move out of your parents. Well, most people, what is it, average age 25, are still living at their parents up till 25 now. It's even going into their 30s. And it's kind of sad because they're blamed for it. They're blamed that you just don't work hard enough. You basically don't do what I do, right? If you're 55 now or 60 or a boomer, etc., they just say, well, and all it is from that point of view. It's like, because when I was a kid, and it's like, yeah, but when you were a kid, that was 50 years ago, 40 years ago. A lot can change in 1 year. So they have no idea what it's like working in the current economy, rent, market, etc. And I know that, again, when you talk to people, when you just see with your own eyes day to day, hey, it seems like only these people work here. And hey, this seems way more expensive than it used to. Hey, why has housing jumped up over 150%? And how did my grandfather afford that working as a snowplower or something? But I can't afford it working as a IT tech or something. Um, yeah, when people start to see with their eyes and start asking those questions, um, and seeing patterns, I think it's time for the elderly and boomers and stuff to try and remember that they're coming from a different point of view, that the world is not at all the same how it was you growing up versus them growing up. And even myself, I'm a millennial myself, but I can already see for Gen Alpha that it's like, yeah, I work hard and I can agree. Maybe there is a change a little bit in culture and maybe some kids work ethic, but every generation has done that to the next generation. The boomers' fathers were saying, how hard they worked versus compared to them, and vice versa all the way down. I think millennials should be the first generation to say, no, we understand the world's changing. There's different hardships. We even feel it. So I can't imagine what it feels like for you. We got to build you up and hold our government accountable, hold our employers accountable, etc. And by holding them accountable, I mean um, the companies that are basically lying and saying, "Oh, we can't find anyone to work these jobs. We have to hire immigrants, etc." Because then places like Tim Hortons, they did nothing but that, and now that what is it called? Not Baskin Robbins. Uh, the other donut shop. It's not Baskin Robbins, I don't think. Is coming to Canada and saying they explicitly said in their mission to coming here is to try and hire students and locals, etc. That could still mean something else, but people are holding them to it. Like, oh, great, you're going to try and hire like Canadian-born students and get people entry-level jobs and seniors, etc. And everyone was hopping on that on social media. Now, soon as Tim Hortons has competition, because there's really no other coffee shop in Tim Hortons demographic of business, because Starbucks is a different price point, etc. There's no other competition there as a chain. They basically have a monopoly. Soon as I want to say it's Baskin Robbins, but anyways, as soon as that other coffee shop came in to say, hey, we're going to hire local, and we're basically going to be a direct competitor to Tim Hortons, suddenly Tim Hortons finds magically, they're like, we're going to hire 100 to 150,000 local students. Like, we're on board too, right? It's like, that should show you right there. It's nothing. It's all about money. It's all about the bottom dollar. You're just a number. You're working for a company. You're trying to make max profits for shareholders. It's not about culture. It's not about nostalgia. It's not about preservation. It's not about like being a national symbol. It's just for lining their own pockets. And yeah, it's pretty much all I had to say. I'm wondering what you guys think. Like, what really does contribute to this problem in Canada? And as I said, I do think immigration is the one of the biggest, and I could make a 10-hour video about that. Um, Maybe it'll come up in future videos. Um, and I also think it's just a divide between generations understanding, and also the internet and AI, etc. There's just, the world's different now, and there's also a generational separation and blaming the youth and saying they're doing it wrong and here's what they need to do to get the job, and understanding that there's way more at play here from so many different economical standards that it's not allowing kids to find the jobs that they need or even get education and getting those jobs even after education. There's there's systematic problems in so many levels. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. I might be making more videos on this kind of stuff in the future because I'm always reading about the unemployment and Canadian economics and yeah, what's going on in the world. So yeah, we'll see where this is headed. I think it's headed in the right direction in the future from what the current Liberal government's doing. I don't support the current liberal government, but I think what Carney's doing versus what Trudeau's doing is better. He's definitely better than Trudeau, and he's making the hard calls, which is why I think some people are stepping away from the Liberal Party even for a little bit there. So yeah, we'll see. Let me know what you think. I will see you next time. Peace.